We're talking indie podcasting business hacks with myself, Amanda Cupido from Lead Podcasting. So before we get started, I just want to give you a quick bio on me if we haven't met yet. My name is Amanda Cupido. I am the founder of Lead Podcasting. Lead Podcasting started in 2020. I'm also the author of Let's Talk Podcasting, The Essential Guide to Doing It Right, which was published in 2018. I have been making podcasts for over a decade. Last year, I did a TEDx talk on the power of audio storytelling, and I'm also a part-time instructor with Seneca Polytechnic, which is located just outside of Toronto, which is where I'm based. Now, to give you a little context on my backstory and business, I have a background in radio. There's a nice picture of me doing a newscast. I did major market radio in Toronto as a reporter, a news anchor, a producer, and most recently as a program director of a top radio station here in the city. But right when I was starting as a radio journalist, I started making podcasts on the side, mostly as an extra means for money. And so I love audio storytelling, I still do. But I've always been very mindful of this intersection of doing great work, following my passion, pursuing this art form, but also making money. And I feel like the making money part is what people don't talk about enough. And especially as I was coming up in the industry, I made my first branded podcast. I was hired as the title was media coordinator at the time, but I was producing a podcast, producing and editing a podcast for someone in 2013. And so, for context, that is before Gimlet was created. That was before season 1 of Serial. This was still a time where I didn't really know where to turn to figure out, how do I do this thing? What do I charge? Specifically within the branded content space or this business space, however you want to refer to it. So I was creating a show for a thought leader. We were uploading it to Podomatic, and I would pre-interview guests. I would create cue lines with draft notes. I would then prep the host and send a specific prep document to the guest. It would be recorded and then sent to me, and I would then edit it together, write a title, description, and post it online. So I was doing all of the jobs at a very early time within the evolution of the industry, especially within this space where thought leaders were using this as a way to build their profile. And so I have learned a lot about this purely from trial and error. And luckily now the industry is exploded, and this is an audio nerd's dream come true, which is what I always say. But there are some best practices out there and peers that I've been able to find. And so what I'm sharing with you today is a combination of things I've just learned through trial and error, things that I have now come to put together based on peers and coming up in the business side of the industry. And so I became freelance. I freelanced for many years just as an individual, kind of off the side of my desk. But then decided to formally scale my business in 2020. So that's when I incorporated. I hired my first full-time employee 6 months after incorporating. I have now changed my business model based on being responsive from what my top talent that I was trying to recruit wanted. So I actually have no full-time employees. My core base are salaried but part-time. And then I work with a lot of freelancers and contractors that are show-based. So I think it's important for me to give you a lay of the land of how I've even built my company. But also knowing that I could speak to life as an individual freelancer, because I did do that for many years, but then also scaling a company and recognizing where I'm at in this journey and still have more to learn. But so my company now has a core of 5 people who are in the day-to-day of the business all the time, and then about 15 freelancers and contractors that are connected to one or multiple shows, and some people that are tied to specific jobs, right? So we also offer services in French and Spanish. So I also have teams that are within different languages as well. So I am going to get into some hacks very soon, but I wanted just to encourage the chat right now to be populated with some information. How long have you been working as an independent? I'm just trying to get a gauge of who's on this call and how long you've been at this. Pop it into the
Amanda,
chat. Yeah.
we're getting a little bit of choppiness. I don't know if you take out your earbuds, if that would help us.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Much, much better.
Much better? Okay, so sorry about that. Here I am thinking earbuds is the best practice and the way to go, but you know, happy to go without the earbuds. Okay, sounding great now. Thank you. So sorry about that. Okay. 6 years, 10 years, 5 years. Oh my gosh, we have some great people on and off for 7 years in between staff work. Oh, I get that. 10 years. Okay, so we have some real vets in here. Less than a year, sorry. Alana, 5 years, Kate, 2 years, less than a year, Anita. So we have a nice mixed bag. 5 years, 3 months. Oh my goodness. But 20 years at BBC Radio. Oh, I know that transition from radio to independent. Good luck, Nick. It's going to be great. This is going to be a whole new world for you. All right. So this is interesting. Great. I love that we have people from all ends of this spectrum. I feel like I'm going to try to give a holistic presentation, but feel free to poke and prod in areas that you're interested in learning more uh, based on where you're at. And so I tried to give a high level view of best practices and things that I wish I knew when I was starting out, but also I've incorporated some things that I am still in the midst of ironing out myself. So um, just to give you a little rundown of what today's presentation is going to include, we're going to talk about establishing services, getting your house in order, setting scope, managing freebies, testimonials, and then I'll open it up for some Q&A. So I will encourage you to save your questions for the end because we should have a nice chunk of time there to get through things. So first off, establishing services. So this is step one as you are navigating this world as an independent. And this can look like what are your services that you're offering directly to clients. This is also what are you promoting as yourself to even production houses that might hire you as part of a larger team, and getting really clear on what you are able to do. Identify your core skills. And so I think it can be really easy to go either way on this. You could either start saying yes to everything because you could kind of do something. I could figure that out, and then suddenly your core offering is this massive long list, even though maybe half of it isn't stuff you want to do. Or the other way around, you think, oh, I've only gotten formal credits, as a story editor, and I just feel like not do anything else other than story editing. And in that case, I feel like you're probably limiting yourself. So really take stock on what do you enjoy doing and what are you good at, and write that as a list. Things that you would be able to do no problem, and have that as your core skills. But then be really clear on what is a stretch zone. So I refer to a stretch zone skill is something that you'd be able to do without having a massive meltdown, but you might need to ask for a little help. You might need to look up some YouTube tutorials. It might take you a little longer than it would for something that's a core skill, but it's still something within your wheelhouse. All right, so this would be stretch zone skills. And then be honest about what's in that weakness zone or in that area that is not going to be part of your core offerings. And so what I like to do is have my core offerings. I have some supplementary offerings that are those stretch zone items. And then there's elements where I am so clear that I do not offer them. And sometimes that can be tough because when you're talking to someone and you're pitching yourself, again, I'm a yes person. So I was the type to be like, yeah, no problem. I can do that. I can do that. And I needed to get really clear on where do my services start and stop. And so, very specifically, I then, in my case with Lead Podcasting, we specialize in audio only podcast, audio first podcast. We do a couple of video ones, but really, if you have a large video strategy, I had to get really comfortable with saying Lead Podcasting is not the go-to source because we don't have a full camera setup. We specialize in narrative podcasts. We do thoughtful chat casts, but that video stuff was an area that I explicitly decided we were not going to go full tilt. It's not going to be part of our core. And so just because that's the case, it doesn't mean you can't offer it. It just means you yourself are not going to do it, and you're really clear on that. But what I like to encourage, especially if you're looking to grow, is to partner accordingly. And so, as Lead Podcasting, as I mentioned, we've really decided that we are sticking with what we do best, which is audio first podcast. So there were clients though that we had connections with, or that we started to build an audio show and they wanted a video component, and I didn't want to just send them off. I decided to build a partnership. And so partnering accordingly is that final point here. And that's because this is how you can, as an individual, grow a business, or as a business now, I'm starting to build partnerships with other businesses. So you can do this on an individual level or on a company level. And so that you're starting to build these connections, and you can kind of upsell as you're going, even from the beginning. All right, I have these core services. If I feel like there's an inkling towards video and that there is a strong strategy and I want to help them accomplish it, I am then going to loop in my partner. So here's a little example. I put examples of me in action with all of these tips to show that I do walk the walk. Um, Here's me with my video partner, Kasim. And so he has this awesome studio. He runs a co-working space, and he just built this studio in the back, which was like a little hidden gem in Toronto. And I felt like no one knew about this. I had been in the space a couple of times. I had seen it and thought, wow, this is great. If one of my clients was looking to do have some video elements, this looks pretty sharp. And so not only did I start brokering this partnership with him, but we said, let's put it out there and make it really obvious, like evident that we are partners now. So this was us. We went into the studio, we recorded this joint video about both of our strengths and how it's lead podcasting intersected with Startwell. And here's how you could work with both of us if you are wanting to do a really strategic podcast that has a video element to it. And so this is one example of me doing it from a company level, but you can, like I said, also do this with an individual person who then you are referring back and forth with. There's different approaches from financial models for how you can work these relationships. Some people do have affiliate referral fees. So let's say someone came to me and they purely wanted a video podcast. If I gave them to Kasim, there would be a like a finder's fee or a referral fee that I could get a kickback from. But mostly what we're trying to do is actually have clients who come in and I'm doing one part of the project and he's doing another. And so that we're putting together a joint estimate and then taking a cut based on the services we provide. So being really clear with how you format those agreements is important, but I do think that being able to extend your services with people you trust and partners can make you feel bigger and really offer your clients or potential people you're working with the full gambit of services they're looking for. All right, next up, get your house in order. So this is now, I'm taking you through chronologically. You're going to get your core services, you have your stretch services, you have some partners. Now it's time to get organized on how are you actually going to do this work and what programs and software do you need. I think that there's a lot of really well-versed people on this call on microphones and recording software, so I'm not going to get into that, but I am going to talk about the back end, like the house, the business, the paperwork, the programs, because I do think that this was something that I struggled with navigating, being like, I don't know, what do I even need to be able to run a business, especially as I began to scale. And so first off was bookkeeping, and this, again, depending on where you're at as an individual or as a company, but as an individual, I found I was really struggling with invoicing and remembering the timing and chasing payments and offering options for payments. Like that really didn't, that was not fulfilling to me. That was stressful for me. So the moment I decided to scale, the very first person I hired was a bookkeeper because I just knew I could barely keep up with it as an individual. I also think that you can look into this as an individual. There is no shame there because it does take a lot of time. And I've really come to realize that time is money. And if you're spending a full day doing your bookkeeping, you could have done a full day pitching shows or pitching your services, which would have brought you more money. And so ultimately, you're losing money by doing your own bookkeeping. Maybe that's backwards math, but for me, I really believe in that investment. And you can get some junior bookkeepers who are just doing the bare basics for like $30 an hour. So you could get someone who could just help you with the basics, and then you're sending it over to an accountant at the end of the year. You don't need a full CPA supporting you all year long, because that would be a bit more cost prohibitive, especially if you're starting out. So bookkeeping, make sure you have a process in place no matter what. My bookkeeper uses QuickBooks, but there's lots of platforms out there. And I remember in the beginning trying to look at these softwares, trying to decide which one my business needed. And then I had this moment of saying, actually, I don't know how to make this choice because I'm not a bookkeeper. We're going to hire someone to do that. So recognizing when to outsource work, really important. Bookkeeping, a big one.
Amanda,
yes.
I'm going to stop you again because we're still getting a bit of chop on the sound.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Maybe I'll switch my Wi-Fi. I'll just hotspot. Maybe it's my Wi-Fi that's being choppy. So let's flip it. I might just
Other people say it might be a problem buffering with Zoom. If you take off your echo cancellation, it might help.
okay.
And I don't know if you have a USB mic anywhere.
I know, because I'm actually at Seneca's teaching at school, so I'm not in my home setup, unfortunately.
And it's either like really clear or then suddenly you sort of drop out. So let's try your hotspot.
Okay, you want me to go to hotspot? Okay. Because my internet does say it might be my noise cancellation. Hold on, very quickly.
Yep. Let's try that because that was a great suggestion.
Okay.
I love that we have
Hey,
so many
folks.
audio people on here, like going, "Hey, try this,
Yes,
try this."
there's so many solutions, but also, okay. Oh wait, I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen for a second.
Okay.
This will help me navigate this a little bit easier. Sound, okay.
Now's when I want to start singing the Jeopardy theme song.
Okay.
Talk us through this and see how the sound's
How
going.
is it sounding now? How is it sounding now? It won't let me, there's Zoom background noise removal and it's not letting me unclick it. I wonder if,
It's sounding okay at the moment, so I think share your screen again, and I'll just encourage you to talk slow.
okay. And then really do please stop me. It sounds good now. Okay. I'm so sorry. This is bad as an audio professional. I feel so badly. Okay,
It's a known problem of audio things. I see it all the time at Anything Audio.
oh, all right. How is it sounding now? Still okay?
Now it's okay. Keep talking.
Okay. But don't be afraid to cut me off again and we could try something else.
Sounds good.
So also for those of you who may be missing some of this, I have a blog coming out with the TPA that's going to capture a lot of this information. So it will be as a resource on the TPA blog as well, these business hacks. I was now moving on to talking about legal and contracts. And so this was another area that as an individual, I didn't have any legal contracts set up. And I was lucky nothing came back to bite me. But as I started my business, I realized that we were doing larger scale productions. And I really did need to have formal contracts in place with people that I was working with. That included clients that I was supporting to make a podcast for, but also with people I was bringing on to do work alongside me or in support with a larger project I was working on. And so I hired an intellectual property lawyer, an IP lawyer, and we drew up a template for work that I was out getting asked to conduct. Drew up a template for people who are working with me, and we drew up some general contracts for music licensing because we were working with some original composers who are making music for some of our shows. These templates, yes, it's a big cost right out of the gate, but I do feel like it adds a layer of professionalism to your work. Sometimes I have agreements where they're sending me a contract and actually the contract is really fair and I feel like it covers both of us, and then I don't send mine. But in the absence of a contract, I always send one now. And it's an extra step, but it really does cover you off in case there were to be discrepancies with work, or if something were to come back later on. So I do think it is quite important to invest in that. Project and file management. This was also something that I wasn't intentional about as I was an individual freelancer. I had a hard drive, a physical hard drive that I worked off of. And also at the time, there wasn't the cloud storage software wasn't as good as it is today. But then I kind of just continue with that hard drive, this one that I would tote around with me all the time. And I just had to make a decision of where are my files, but I had to make a decision of I need to, now that I'm growing, I need people to have access to these files, and it's just on this hard drive. So great to have a backup on a physical hard drive, but really important to have some sort of intentional file storage system. And project management. All of the projects as a freelancer for me were living in my head, and if anything were to happen, it just would have been gone. And so I was really intentional as I started to scale of like, where am I downloading this information? Who has access to that information? And how is it best laid out and kept up to date? And so there's a lot of software out there. I have experimented with a lot of things. Some things also I just fell into using. And so establishing your stack, picking what are you committing to, do the trials, do the, have the walkthroughs and the demos, but at some point you have to just make a decision. And I think there could be like an analysis paralysis with some of these softwares. It's quite overwhelming. But I would like to encourage you to just pick one. And if it really doesn't work, you could switch later. But I found myself getting caught up in some of the nuance. And so I'll show you my stack, and not to say that this is what's going to work for everybody, but this is where I've landed. And so these are the systems that I use for lead podcasting. So Notion is our project management system. And this is where we are keeping all of our shows up to date. Different people have different access to different pages and different shows. You can upload files, you can have a chat, and you can archive things, but then bring them back if the show is not an always on show. So I found Notion to be really great. Dropbox is where all of our audio is stored and how we deliver audio to clients. I find it really reliable, and sometimes I landed on Dropbox just because some people have OneDrive, some people have G Suite, and if you have the opposite, then they don't like each other, and I just thought Dropbox was neutral territory, and so it's worked for me quite well. We use Slack for internal communications. This is the most recent thing I've added to my stack, and so that's why I'm constantly learning and growing too. We did use Notion for a lot of chats, and a lot of emails, but we found it was kind of being bogged down, and not everyone had access to Notion because some people were just doing really minimal parts on a project, and to register them on Notion was a little bit it was overkill. But Slack is really easy to add people into. So we've officially started our Slack as of last week. So this is fresh off the press that we now have moved away from just Notion and email and using Slack for internal communications. Bitwarden is where we put all our passwords. This is thanks to my operations manager, who was starting to ask for passwords. And I would typically, when I'm sending them to someone, I would send half of it as an email, and then I'd send the other half as a voice note through WhatsApp. And I was trying to be really secure with how I shared passwords. And she was the one who said, we need to get into something more secure than this wonky thing that you've got going. And everyone has one password here or there through a series of messages as in WhatsApp. So Bitwarden is where we store our passwords. Calendly is how we do all of our booking. So I actually don't have a virtual assistant, but Calendly is like my virtual assistant. I swear by it, and I've gotten my whole team on it. And so people can have availability, see your calendar. You could put up options for different time slots if you buy the professional account. And so basically, I have different lengths of meetings: 20-minute consult, 30-minute meeting, 45-minute meeting, 1-hour meeting, and I will send people the link for the amount of time that I'm attributing to the meeting length. And so that's a really good way to watch your time. Because I think if you just do a meeting, people will take an hour of your time every time. And that can be cumbersome to your workflow. And so if people see that they're getting a 20-minute calendar invite, then you got to stick with that. And I think it sends a message of this is a 20-minute meeting, right? So Calendly has been really good, and it prevents the back and forth of seeing when you're available. It just accesses your calendar. And I build in like 15-minute breaks in between each of my meetings. And then Aptivo is my newest addition to my stack, and this is a CRM system. So right now, and again, indication of that I'm still growing too and learning. And this was one where I had a little analysis paralysis of like, what CRM do I invest in? But for those of you who don't know what a CRM is, this is just where you're tracking all of your customers or people that you've dealt with. And so, for instance, if you were to go to Evolutions next month, and you meet a bunch of people and people give you their card or write their email on a scrap piece of paper, you go to this system and you input every single person you met, their email address, maybe a little note so that you remember who they are. And then you could tag them with Evolutions. And so then you have this database that's growing of all the people that you've met, that you might want to work with, or that might want to hire you. And so right now, mine is just all over the place. It's my LinkedIn, it's my email, it's a stack of cards that's in a drawer in my desk. And so I'm trying to consolidate that because I think that's really important for follow-ups and managing your contacts. Okay, I'm just gonna pause to see how's my audio. Is it better?
So much better.
Okay, whew. Let's go to the next thing. So now we're talking about setting scope. I think this is really important, and I've learned a lot from trial and error in this space. We do so much work, and I think I say we collectively, because I just think this industry, we're all so similar in how we approach it. We care about the projects we work on. We know we can execute in a lot of different ways, and it's very easy to get taken advantage of. And so now, every single time a project starts, I have a very clear SOW, which stands for scope of work. And so usually when someone reaches out to me wanting me to help them with a show or even one element of production, I write out every single thing that I think is required to do this job. And I'm going to give you some examples on the next slide of what this looks like. But it's really important to be very specific because people don't understand sometimes the amount of work it takes to do something that seems simple. It also sometimes they don't understand what are part of your core services and what's outside of that. And so being extremely detailed is very important. But then also making sure that the other party in this understands. And so what I'll do is this is usually the process. I'll take a call with someone. I'm taking lots of notes of what I think they need. I put together a sample SOW with prices attached. So it is like an estimate, but on the second page is full breakdown of every single thing that's included. Then we get on another call and I walk them through the whole thing of what's included and what's not. And then I keep that front and center. I share that with my team if I have a team working on the project, and we continue to refer back to that if needed. And so, for instance, a recent client of mine was launching a new show and they were paying us to produce the episodes and upload them. But they did not pay us to launch the RSS feed. And so for those of you who've launched an RSS feed, you know, it can be kind of annoying and like you've got to go and register and then get the link and put it in Apple and do the verification code with your Apple ID and These are all things that it's so easy to be like, all right, no problem, I'll just do it for you. But that's time and that's money. And so we have two separate line items. It's a launch setup and uploads. And so they had not opted to include launch setup in their scope of work. And so I was able to pull up our document and say, look, we've included that we will upload episodes with description and keywords and a title, but we never said we were establishing the RSS feed. If you would like that, that's extra money. So anyway, actually, I'll just go to the next slide because it shows exactly what this looks like. So Here's how I set up my scope of work. I actually use Canva and I try to make it designed really nicely. So this is the cover page that you would get on one of our scope of work documents, the image on the left. And then on the right, I've just kind of pulled a little of an example of what's in this. So what I would do is I put on the very first page, I put an estimate, which includes a breakdown of one-time services and episodic services. And so being very specific. I am going music sourcing, launch setup is one of the one times, trailer creation, show development, all of these under one time. So they understand too that this you do it once and you're set. Then episodic is the recording, the editing, sound design, uploads, social media assets, right? Episodic. And then I do 2 subtotals and then I do a massive total for however many episodes they were thinking. Or if it's always on, then I'll do a total like per month as a sample or whatever. But here's how granular I get. The next page, I take every single line item and I break it down with every single thing that is included in that line item. And so that's why we can hold this up and be really clear on what I'm doing and what we're not doing and what's included here. So here's what I write for launch setup. 30-minute consultation call to discuss hosting platform options, registration on selected platform, upload show graphic, title, tags, and description, RSS setup and sync with players, 30-minute follow-up call to finalize sync with Apple ID and Google login. And that's relevant for me because I don't run my company as a network. We're purely an agency. And so all of our clients have that as within their realm and attached to their individual Apple IDs and whatnot. So you're very clear. And then I say a note at the end that client's going to be required to input their credit card for monthly hosting fees if applicable. Some of my people I work with are choosing to upload on Anchor. I give them all this debrief in the initial 30-minute consultation with prices, and then they make their choice. Especially since I'm not connected to any hosting platforms. So I put this as an example because it can seem over the top how granular I'm being, but it is really important to be super granular because that's how you protect yourself. And also it shows value for the price you're attributing to this. So whatever number you are going to clock for launch setup, it's so easy for them to have just asked you to do it for free and you'd be like, oh, okay, fine, it's not that much work. But actually it does take a lot of work. And then when you write it out like that, it's like, oh, wow, that is a lot of work. That person does, the client can start to think that person does deserve to be compensated for this. Right? And so I think it's understanding the value we bring in that, hey, I've set up an RSS feed now so many times. I'm going to do it faster than you for sure. And I'm going to do it properly where you're not having issues. And so there's a value that even just comes with that. For context with lead podcasting and our show volume, in the last 3 years, we've done more than 35 different shows. And so I forgot to say that at the beginning, but I do think that's important to understand just like how many times I've gone through this and how I've refined this and maybe it's still not perfect, but this is where I'm at currently with how I present things to people who want to work with us. And the people that we're working with also, it's like some of them are larger corporations. We've done podcasts for the big banks in Canada, CIBC and universities. But we've also done projects for individuals and we've also done projects for media outlets. So more traditional journalistic approaches. So we work with the Walrus, which is our national magazine, the Globe and Mail, a newspaper. So and then also we work with nonprofits who are just trying to tell like great, thoughtful stories, but they're ultimately a brand, right? So I'm using the word branded podcast a lot, but I meant to explain how wide ranging that work can look, especially in the context of the work I do. All right, managing freebies. So this comes right after the elements of establishing the scope. So this is how you manage them. Have an out of scope rate. So usually we work on flat rates for each of our line items. We don't work on hourlies, but we do work on an hourly out of scope rate. Now, this is up to you for how you want to price this. There's no right or wrong way, but we establish anything in our initial contract, and I got my lawyer to put a spot for this, anything that is outside that all of the line items that are listed in this appendix is just clocked at an hourly rate of, and whatever that hourly rate we establish is. And it's for us different depending on the scope of nature of the project. So you have that really clearly listed right out of the gate in your initial contract so that they know and that you're safe, that if you end up charging this, that this rate is not negotiable now. It's like part of the initial, or you negotiate in the beginning. So you're not negotiating it when the work needs to be done. Then choose carefully when you want to provide something for free. So you have to almost train the people you work with to understand how you work. And so if you start giving away for things for free and you don't mention it, then they're just going to know, oh, I could just ask her to do something and she'll do it. She did it before a million times. But if right out of the gate, you start acknowledging what's out of scope, they start, I don't think it's a bad thing. My clients just know, oh, she'll call it out when something's out of scope, and then I have the choice on whether or not I want to move forward with it. So being really clear with your communications. Now, you can still give freebies. I know that it can be really annoying to nickel and dime someone, especially if the thing they're asking is so tiny. You just don't want it to snowball. And that happens so often with me. And so what I do now is I call out immediately if something is out of scope, and my team knows how to do it too. I share the scope of work with everybody working on it, so we all know exactly what's in scope and what's out. I establish out of scope rates with each of the people that are working with us, so they also know that that's my job really, is to make sure that they're getting compensated fairly for what the client might be asking them to do. And so we'll say, hey, this is out of scope as per our agreement. This would probably cost, this is either a whole other line item, which is here's the price for it, or if this is just extra work, here's an estimate of how much we think it will cost. Do you want us to move forward, yes or no? So we're not just doing the work, we're telling them how much it would cost extra, and then we're gonna do that work and bill them at the end. Or if it's something super tiny that you want to give away for free intentionally, I would say, hey, this is out of scope. This would normally cost $100. I am going to do it for free, but next time I will have to charge the out of scope rate. So you kind of give them that freebie, but that you also are making it very clear, ideally in writing, that you're not going to just constantly do this extra work for free. Next time it's going to cost $100. So that's a nice way to ease them into the process of not just having to go hard. Because I know sometimes it feels icky to ask for money, especially if it's a little thing like this. But here's an important other element to keep in mind. Track all of those freebies and the attached value. Because I had a client who I did this throughout the whole project, and then at the end, she felt like I was nickel and diming her. And I said, we've given you so many freebies. And I learned, you know what? On every invoice, I now put everything that I'm charging, but then I put every single freebie and the associated value, but then I put discounted and like take it away, so that they can have a tally running of how many freebies I've now given. $100 for this indicated discount, right? 100. So that it's really clear, because it's so easy to do so much work and not be appreciated or acknowledged for it, because people don't realize how much time it can take to do some of these little things. So here's an example of an email, because again, I think that sometimes the wording, I was intimidated to send this to clients. So here's a real behind the scenes of a client. This was literally this month. And so they were asking for a small tweak. We had approved the trailer, it was locked, but they were asking for a shortened version that they wanted to use for ads. And so it was a couple of tweaks. And so I said, great news. Yes, we can definitely accommodate this. We would just need to bill for our hourly out of scope. So here's an example where I just like attributed it to the hourly value. There's my estimate. It should not be more than $200 per trailer. We're doing a French and an English. Would you like us to go ahead with the edit? Please confirm if it's just for the English or the French as well, right? Very clear. The client ended up saying, yep, no problem, that works, please do it for both, right? And we got it. And so you don't have to feel bad, you don't have to apologize. It's just really clear, cut to the point. And also, I've been working with this client for a long time, so they just know. And it's great, it works. You don't have to be ashamed. I think I was just nervous to ask for this stuff in the beginning. Okay, last thing, testimonials, and then we'll get to some Q&A. I think we forget about asking for testimonials. We all know testimonials work. We all know the power of a testimonial, but then it's sometimes we forget to ask for it for ourselves. And sometimes you feel silly asking for it, but really they are so important. I have built them in now to my website, to my proposals, to my scope of work. I actually put a testimonial at the end. I do think it's really important. So don't be afraid to ask. In a worst case scenario, they don't leave you one, and that's okay. But ask and try to ask at a time that makes sense. I think I've gone back to clients that like I hadn't worked with in a year, being like, "Whoops, can you give me a testimonial?" It's not top of mind for them. It was too long, and that's okay. I tried to rectify forgetting to ask for one, but um, if you can do it right before the end of the project, that's usually the best time I find, where we're about to wrap up. People are hopefully feeling in a good mood. It's not fully done yet. Ask for the testimonial. Gives you an opportunity that if you have another call with them, you can do a nice friendly reminder. So but be strategic, and I think you'll know when to ask, right? It's got to be kind of within it and closer to the end or a happy moment, and don't let too much time pass, because then it's not as top of mind. Provide a framework. Sometimes people aren't great at writing. They're like, I don't know what you want me to write, so I'll even write sample prompts. I'll say, if you can write a testimonial, and if you could just talk about the ease of the recording process with us and what the editing workflow was like, something like this, right? I'll give them specific prompts. Or depending on the project, what I also thought was like a strength from the project, I'll even prompt them for that. And it's interesting. Some people use it, some people don't. Great. But I've had people who've used every single prompt. They clearly just answered every answer, and that was their testimonial. I was like, that person might not have written one if I hadn't given them the prompts, because it's like people can get overwhelmed with writing things. So try to make it as easy as possible. Decide where you want these testimonials. I made a little bit of a mistake. And so mine are kind of all over the place now, but it's not a mistake. It's just, it was me learning as I went. But if you're an individual, and when I was an individual, I asked for a lot of people to leave me my testimonials on my LinkedIn, which makes sense. And at the time it worked for me. But now that I'm a business, I've registered my business with Google, and I point everyone to my Google business for testimonials. It helps massively with SEO, and I can still just copy and paste them from there and use them in other areas. So now that's where I point people to put them now. And then we have like an ongoing doc, and if they don't do it, I have had people who didn't do a testimonial, and don't feel bad. They've just, a lot of times people just forget. And so I definitely do that friendly follow-up if you don't get it the first time you ask. And so here's an example of what our testimonials look like. So I've just started pointing to Google, so you'll see we have 6 reviews now, but we're a 5.0. We're also good at asking people to rate and review our podcast. Why not rate and review our work? And so if you're on Google as a business, definitely encourage you to point them there, give them a very specific link. You could send people a link, and I still give them the prompts. I also put the screen grab of one from 2020 when I was working it was before I launched the company, but I was working as an individual, and so I had it was with Kobo. They wrote me the testimonial on my LinkedIn. And then this is a little screenshot of our Notions page, because there were some testimonials that we actually just got unprompted. People would just email us saying really nice things. Or one time I was on a video call that we happened to be recording, and someone said a really nice thing at the end of the video call, and so I just transcribed those, or I whacked them into a Notion page that we have for testimonials. I obviously share it with back to them, saying, is it okay if we use this? People are usually very kind. If they said those nice words about you, they're probably going to say yes. And so then we do also have this like private doc of things that people had just kind of said off the cuff that we've been capturing. So I use them for proposals. I use them for my website. I use them. I've done video sizzle reels of our company where I put them up. And so they're really, really valuable. Okay. Questions. I talked a lot, and I'm so sorry again for these mic issues. I hope you got the gist of what I was saying. We do have about almost 15 minutes for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so I can see the chat box better. So I'm going to go into the Q&A chat right now and see what's come through. So, some people were putting how long they'd been indie producing for. Okay, great. We got someone asking, how do you reactivate dormant clients? So that's, I mean, there's no magic to that. I've definitely had clients who've been dormant and it's not for any reason. They've just kind of gone away. And I've also had ones that have come back. Different ways of doing this. Number one, making sure that they're in your professional network and wherever you're posting. I use LinkedIn all the time. And so I have dormant clients who will then randomly comment on my post and then DM me like organically and say, oh man, I really do need to start my podcast again. So it's nice to just keep them in your world, in your orbit. Make sure you're posting about your work and that they're connected wherever whatever that platform makes sense to being. I swear by LinkedIn, but it might be different depending what your niche is. Another thing too is just reaching out and saying, hey, how are things going? I was thinking about your show and I just always thought it was so strong and we had great momentum starting. Any interest in hopping on a call to talk about what it might be like to start it up again? I've tried this. It could be tough because usually I find if people want to start it, they reach out to you. So I don't chase too hard on dormant ones, but I do send like a nice little follow-up like this. To make sure that they know I'd still love to work on it and how much I love the show. It's also really nice when you have an update to give them. So someone, for instance, I had one client who worked with us as a one-off, but then I submitted that for an award and then we got nominated. So it was perfect excuse to be like, hey, it's been a year, but guess what? The show, the one-off audio thing we did together is now nominated for a Canadian Online Publishing Award. Can't wait. Like, we should celebrate. Let's hop on a call. Would love to hear what you're up to. So if there's any way that you can like submit or repost. Oh, and that's another thing. I do throwback posts on old projects on social media all the time because you're just continuing to love on a show and do some little audiograms and it re-engages them even on social media. So those are a couple ways that you can try. Okay. How do you balance adding or removing services due to AI and increasing services already offered? Yep. AI is a big deal. And okay, so I just took an AI course from University of Oxford and I have a new certificate in this. So I have a lot to say on AI. It cannot be said in 10 minutes. But basically, my prediction is that all editing is going to be AI. And you're going to be able to tell a computer, please make this sound like This American Life meets Serial, and then it will pump out the show. So I think that humans are not going to get completely eliminated. And I think that we're still many years away from that, but I think we have to start wrapping our heads around this reality. People who go bah humbug to this, you're just prolonging the inevitable. So what I say is try to prepare. What can AI not do? It's like the human connection. It's the ultra creativity. They can be creative because they can, as if it's a person, it can make things out of nothing, but it always is going to need human oversight. And so I would just not be afraid of it. I would say try to begin to wrap your head around how can we work with it. And maybe that means if you're an editor, starting to look at sound design and position yourself to broaden those editing services, because I do think that just like the plain old editing is going to be impacted. So we have to just be realistic about that. Voice stuff. Like I'm doing some podcasts with CEOs who barely have time to do a half an hour chat. I already know that they're going to sign off their rights eventually to have their voice do an episode and have them look like this cool CEO who does a podcast and they'll never have had to record, or maybe they record one episode so we get their cadence and then it's off, right? Like it's very real. There's going to be use cases. It will get so good. It's not perfect right now, so we have time, but I would just say start thinking about, okay, so for me, if I was coaching, I offer coaching for hosts. And maybe we won't need that because the AI is going to be able to take a little snippet of you and make you sound amazing without the coaching. So what else am I going to be able to offer that people will feel of value? Maybe that's a strategic session. Maybe that's creative show development. Maybe it's an extension of the podcast, but I'm thinking about that in my own business too. So I hope that didn't sound too grim, but it's a reality that's definitely coming. And I would encourage you to be open to it, experiment with it. Identify what the human element you can bring and champion that as you move forward. Creativity and emotional intelligence is the biggest strengths that we will always have. Okay. Next. So I answered that one live. Um, Two questions from Sarah. When do you know you as a producer is ready to start a company? Oh my gosh. Never. You'll never fully know. When do you feel like you have enough potential clients? Honestly, even when I was starting, I wasn't sure. Even when I hired my first full-time employee, I still wasn't sure if I was making the right move. I believe that if you're starting to feel like I didn't feel like, oh, I'm doing the work of two people, let me go do this. It still felt like I could manage it. It was more like, do I want to take this to another level? Do I want to do more? Because ultimately, I was filling up my calendar as an individual producer decently enough. It wasn't perfectly full, but it was decently full. And I just went, how I'm not in conversations to allow for more work because I'm so busy doing work. And what if I had someone else helping execute on work so that I could be constantly having the conversation about new work? Because that's how you get new work, right? And so you'll find as a freelancer, I'm sure there's ups and downs because when you're in the work, you're not recruiting for new work necessarily. Some things might come at you, but then you got to find work, then you're in the work, and then it says ebb and flow. Whereas now, me personally, I'm just in the finding of new work all the time. And I take little projects here and there that I love, but I'm never like knee deep in the work where I've gone away for 6 months and I'm not finding more work. So I'm just like always in that. And I do the show development and I bring in the work and I do show development and then I hand it over to a team. And then I'll oversee, I'm an executive producer on the shows where I'm making sure it's, sounding the way we imagined from the beginning. So, but there is no magical moment. You'll always feel a little nervous. I still feel nervous when I'm hiring new people and expanding, but I think that's just part of it. I know that's like a non-answer, but that is the real answer. Okay, Logan, how do you go about setting your pricing? We have a lot of clients. Yeah, okay. Pricing is tough. I'm constantly trying to figure that out myself. Their rate sheet is great. I definitely use that. And I even tell clients, sometimes I have clients who try to fight me on things. Like I point to Air, I go, look, actually, we have an industry standard. It's in line with that, so the Air media resource for their pricing guide is very valuable. I definitely lean on that. I also just experiment. Like sometimes there's some things in there that don't really exactly apply to what I'm doing. But I will just try to up the price a little more and see if people go for it. And then sometimes people stop going for it. Then I go, okay, maybe I need to turn it back down. And so I actually do like slightly adjust. And I do have a sliding scale. So I charge individuals and nonprofits a certain rate. And then I have corporate rates, which obviously I don't, I'm intentional with how I'm using those. But we mainly do corporate stuff. And I try to also sometimes I just work backwards of like, okay, what's a fair rate to pay someone for this? And then what kind of margin do I need on top of that to be able to cover off my business expenses and my time on this? And so sometimes I just work backwards and make a price like that. And sometimes I'll ask for budgets from clients. Hey, what is your budget? And I'll work within that. And I'll do a whole project as a work bag. So sometimes that's helpful. But my like hourly rate, even that I change that all the time, personally, as I'm trying to experiment. And I realize that sometimes if you are going to go with an hourly rate, different tasks require different hourly rates. And so, editing is one kind of task, but then like doing a workshop or a presentation or coaching someone who's going to be a host, it's a higher rate, it's a higher hourly rate, right? So understanding what work you're doing and what the value is of that, I think is important. Then we have Nick, never thought about it, but I guess getting clients to pay for their own hosting is essential. I'm currently using RSS for my own hosting. Is it better to use Buzzsprout, Acast, etc.? I mean, they're all doing similar things. Depends what you want to do with your podcast for hosting. And my clients want different things. Some of my clients are really stingy. They're like, I don't want to pay. So I'm like, okay, I guess you're going for Spotify for podcasters. And so, I try to explain to them there's different pricing models. Libsyn does it based on the amount of audio. Simplecast does it based on audience size, right? I just kind of give them the broad strokes of how different ones work. And then I let them choose. I've used a bunch of different things. I've used Buzzsprout. It's really user-friendly. That's what I say. It's a bit more expensive, but very user-friendly. If you are wanting to take on the uploading yourself, you might really like that back end. But it's also good to experiment with some free trials with them, with multiple ones. Just so you can get a sense of what the backends look like. So now I've seen so many backends that I can kind of just speak to a lot of them through the work I've done. But no perfect answer, no one that's like the best out of the best. Okay. So, oh my gosh, there's lots of questions. We're gonna have to do the parlay on Slack. I think I have time for one more, and maybe I'm just gonna jump quickly to how do you price a podcast? Oh, for can you share numbers? Okay, pricing. It's I feel like the air media rate is the best one to go look at. There's a really wide range. Okay, I'm also in Canada, so I'm using Canadian dollars, but like an example, like maybe a low end edit for just a cleanup edit for a podcast, it would be like $250 as a nonprofit. Um, that would be the lowest I go for a cleanup edit. And I use the difference between cleanup edit and content edit. Content edit, you're like taking out massive chunks, rearranging the chat cast. This is not narrative, right? Just a cleanup chat cast. That's my minimum. And then my maximum for something like that is around $500. So that's a range for a cleanup edit on about a half an hour to a 45-minute episode. And that's a start. And then I hope that range kind of just even shows how big that is. And then of course, if it's a content edit, the price goes up. If we're doing narrative, price is going up. But also there might be certain elements like narrative. I have some clients who are like, we want to do the interviews and then we're going to give you Zoom audio and then we want you to write a narrative around it. Right. So it's like, there's no one, I actually do custom prices for everyone. I'm looking at that on my own self. It takes a lot of time for me to do these custom prices. But I do think that so many projects are so creative and different. It's hard to just have like one set price for everything. Hourly editing rates, I range between $90 an hour to $150 an hour based on the expertise of my editors, like they're senior editors. And so that's kind of the hourly rate I'll do for out of scope editing. All right, it's 1:00. Gotta stop. Thank you all so much. And I hope that you come to the Slack for the parlay and please connect with me. I just love this community so much. And so find me on LinkedIn, Amanda Cupido. I'm also lead podcastings on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And yeah, I hope to, and my email is amanda@leadpodcasting.com if you want to shoot me a note.